Thank you. Councillor Horneck.
Well, I feel like we almost all need to drop a loonie in a swear jar for saying the S word. Snow. Snow, right? Councillor Butt, you, Madam Mayor, you're all put a loonie in the S, yeah. I mean, I think, just to kind of elaborate more on the debate, I mean, I think we face a challenge in the city where we have an aging population in single detached homes, right? And it's creating a generational issue because, you know, people who were previously more able, who could break down those ice blocks, are not able to as much anymore, right? So I think it is a challenge. I guess my question for the commissioner, I mean, I know we're out to tender on this. There's some times where you look at it and you're like, man, that's just the price of living in Canada. There's other times though when you're like somebody who lives on a 4-lane road and they're getting 2 lanes of windrow is an even steeper hill to climb. And I wonder, is there any differentiation that we can make in the contract? Because look, windrows stink no matter where you are, but there's also some where you look at it and you're like, you're not just clearing out 1 lane of traffic, you're clearing out 2 lanes of traffic. That's an even higher bar to have to do. Is there any differentiation we can make about that, Scott? And while Scott's waiting to come down, I will say I did take the time where I got a small number of compliments on our snow clearing. It was small, I know it's rare, but some very kind people did compliment us, and I do make sure I pass those on to Scott and his team, because I know the differentiation of people who send a compliment versus a complaint is not always the best. Scott, do you have a thought?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Horneck. Thank you for that. We didn't separate in the tender, the procurement that's out now, the differentiating between you know, a 2 or 3 lane road that might have some residential streets and just the regular residentials. It was more just how many dwellings do we actually have. And it's very difficult to do townhouse dwellings because you got nowhere to put the snow even if we went out with the machine. So we will detail all that information for you. Something that we can look at, but I haven't really had a lot of complaints from like the people on Kothra, for instance, that we actually clear. It's been the people just on the residential streets that have been the boisterous ones for this episode, so we'll put it that way. But something we can look at.
Okay, I guess I had 2 other quick points. One is also the other place where I had sympathy is people in the bends of a road, right? And I know that it's a challenge sometimes to kind of get deeper into the curve of a street depending on how it's constructed. But again, you know, when you're leaving several feet of snow, it is that much harder on people. And again, sometimes you have to say, we are in Canada, but there's sometimes you look at something on a video and you're like, oh boy, yeah. Is there anything we can do a little bit in our current on that, just getting into those bends a little bit better?
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Horneck, we do instruct the plows to try to get as close to the curb as they can on those, we call them the deep elbows, where you've got those wide turns that you have to do. We also set up loader routes that we have loaders go in afterwards and then clear those areas. So if you have any of your residents that maybe we missed it, that it's not on a map, let us know and we can make sure that we get that added, because we do have about 12 to 15 loaders in each one of the yards that we have that are specifically to do the deep elbows as well as clean up the courts, because you know we use the loaders to clean up the courts and pile everything into the middle. So if you do get those requests, send them over to me and I'll make sure that we get them onto the routes.
Perfect, thank you. I guess last question I have was maybe this is more to Jeff and parking enforcement. So in a couple of cases, one particular case, a resident saw that the snow was coming, the streets were littered with cars. And so when subsequently the plow comes around, it just can't get down the road. Is there anything we can be doing on the parking enforcement to, because you know when we have a snow date, we shouldn't be out there parking our cars, and I know we make the announcements, but is there anything, especially with our possibly amped up bylaw, that we'd be able to do on that side of things?
Sure. I'll field that one. When the commissioner passes you the torch, you take it. So yeah, we work with our parking enforcement team to try to help prevent that. We do have the no parking 2 to 6 a.m. When we are in a winter event, we suspend the temporary parking permits to try to help. We do have a bit of a pilot going on in Ward 10 with the one street parking only that has been working and maybe not always working. It's very difficult if you don't have kind of a broad no parking through the winter for our vehicles to do any kind of activity. And it's not just in any particular area, it's a citywide thing. So We do try to work with our parking enforcement teams. There's communications that our team has. As we know we're getting into the residential areas, our crews and inspectors will actually go and look into the streets that we're getting ready to go into. And if we see some issues, try to let them know. But they're not resourced to be able to do this as big as what we need to across the city as well. But we do partner with them as best we can to try to minimize it, because it adds extra expense and time for us if we have to go back because of parked cars afterwards. People think if they park their car there, oh, they're not going to get the windrow, but when we come back, guess what? You know, we put the snow back in the driveway. So, or the neighbor next to them ends up getting it, and then we get the call because they don't like having that in their driveway because their neighbor parked their car in the street. So it's a challenge for us, but we try to work with our parking enforcement friends as best we can.
Okay. And I know from what I heard just in Toronto, you know, in some cases they'll tow the car, especially I think if the plow is completely blocked from getting onto a street. Maybe that is a route we have to go in. What they do is they stick a big orange flag on it, like along with the parking ticket, and it's like, you better come get your car right now. And otherwise it's getting hauled. Is that anything we could kind of do? I mean, look, I know you've got a big city, but there's got to be some times where like you can't get the plow down the road, and that's inconveniencing a higher number of people, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Horneck. So, yeah, certain, like as an example, Toronto does that a lot more because of things like streetcars as well. So, yeah, I was driving on Dundas Street in Toronto on Saturday, and there was a car parked blocking a streetcar, which is, you know, and there was a tow truck on its way. So you can see the operation and process. And so we have done that in the past where we do tow vehicles away. It's not a level of service that we provide across the city. It is, you know, we have that available as sort of a, you know, on an emergency type basis. But it's not sort of a level of service that's offered during winter events, just from a resource perspective in terms of managing that type of demand.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Scott. I know it was a hard winter. If my colleagues will indulge me one more minute, I have one last question. This one's actually more to Jody. So this is about parks, and we have some parks that are seasonal parks. They support usually sports fields. They get barred in the winter. I have got a couple of examples where people are saying during the summer months there are a few cars coming in and the parking lots are unlit. That's our current standard, is to not have them lit. But cars are coming in late at night and things are being exchanged through windows. I don't know, maybe they're trading hockey cards, but I don't suspect that's the case. I guess, is that something we've had a report on lately, that we could look at the service level of that? Because I think in particular when we have people calling us out for activities that are repeat, and I understand, you know, yes, we can call Peel Police, but Peel Police will deem that a very low priority of response because it's not an actionable high-risk situation. Is that something we could look at, or have we looked at recently?
Thank you, through you, Chair Mahoney, to Councillor Horneck. Haven't specifically looked at parking lots. We do have parking lots that are either maintained or not maintained in the winter. The ones that aren't maintained in the winter are generally gated, where we have the P gates and we close them off, but there are some still that aren't maintained, that don't have P gates, and it really depends on whether we have access. In some cases, we have parking agreements with schools where we maintain certain parking lots, even though it may not seem like the park is used, but we have an access agreement with a school to keep a parking lot open. So it's not an easy yes or no answer. And I can say that since COVID, we went back and we really looked at what facilities were open in the wintertime. And so we opened tennis courts and we opened some of our artificial fields. And it sort of became a new level of service. Once COVID restrictions were in place, we didn't go back and close those all up because the members of the community really liked access to the parks more for winter use. So I'd have to look at the specific locations, but if it isn't a parking lot that we can close down because we have another agreement, we do work with Peel Regional Police as well, or if it's a parking lot where we really just need to look at getting some P gates in there and closing it during off-season, we can do that as well.
Yeah, in particular, lighting, I guess, is the challenge that I think the neighbors really, they'd like to see some lighting in the park, because I know that's not our standard on that kind of park, right? I
will say lighting in the park is a little bit like our speed hump issue, that everybody wants lighting in the park until the park is lit up and then they don't want lighting in the park. So we have a standard on where we light pathways and where we light parking lots and where we don't. And it is very site specific because, you know, part of the SEPTED kind of philosophy is if you light it, you're encouraging people to use that area. And is it really meant for use all night long? So we have to take a look at that. I'm sorry, I can't give you a really simple, easy answer to that.
Thank you so
But I'm
much.
happy to work with your office on it.
And thank you to my colleagues for giving me a little extra time there. Appreciate it.